Hello and welcome to Storytime. I'm Kathy Ramsperger, author of the award-winning The Shores of Our Souls, and I'm also a coach on Ground One and Step Into Your Story, which I founded. Today, we've got a show about entrepreneurship, owning both a digital and a brick and mortar business, and best of all, books. Kaylee Mullis will field your questions for our honored guest, Terri LeBlanc. So ask away, please, comment away. This is your chance. Terri is an operations and process wizard, serving writers, book coaches, editors, and copywriters with 2 decades of experience. But in addition, and what we'll focus on today, she co-owns the Swamp Fox Bookstore. We'll find out why it's called that in Marion, Iowa, with 2 of her friends, and that's the focus of today's chat. Everything Terri does helps authors and book coaches gain more time in their day for their creative pursuits, and that gives them more time to sell their books. Since February 2021, she's partnered with Veronica Jans of Business Laid Bare, where she serves as an operations strategist. And on a more personal note, she's a proud cat mom like me, a lover of coffee like me, and I wish I were a horse mom like her, but I'm not. I love horses. She also loves naps, her husband, and books, and not necessarily in that order. So welcome, Terri.
Okay, thank you.
So let's hop right in. We've got a lot to cover. So my first question is, why did you decide to own a bookshop, and especially right now?
It's kind of an interesting story. A few years ago, started working at a local independent used bookstore. And so the woman that owned the store hired me on a whim. I had gone in, she had hired me to do her website because her husband didn't have time to do their website. While I was in there training her how to use the website and how to send out emails via MailChimp, there was a woman that came in and was asking questions about a local author, that she had a book there. I knew the author, I knew about the book. I hadn't necessarily read it, but I met the author and knew quite a bit about it. So I told the woman about the book. The author was local, and she would, if she buys the book, to feel free to reach out to the author. She's really active on social media, etc. The book sold, and within 24 hours, Ursula had sent me a message on Facebook, and she's like, "Do you want to work here? We don't know how to hand sell books." And so that's how my friendship with her started. And we always thought, in the part of town that we live in, there should be an independent bookstore. It's a very cute, very Midwestern, traditional small town. A lot of locally owned businesses in the downtown area with that, brick facade you see, and like Back to the Future kind of feeling, right?
Yeah.
And we had the opportunity to make that dream come true last year, in the middle of the pandemic. But it was kind of an interesting situation because we are probably one of the smallest bookstores that I know of. We are only 360 square feet. So in terms of the space that we're managing, it's very manageable based on the ups and downs of the economy and customer base right now because of what's happening with COVID. And then a month after we opened, we dealt with a natural disaster here too. So we've weathered both things relatively well.
It certainly seems like it. It certainly seems like it, and your shelves are stocked, and
yes,
more than
all the books are coming in for the holidays. So that's
cool.
the fun thing right now is we're starting to get Christmas stuff in, and the kids say we're getting Thanksgiving stuff in and Halloween stuff in too. So it's kind of fun over in the kids section.
Oh, I bet it is. That was my favorite section during the holidays. So, why is your bookstore named the Swamp Fox? I know that I know who that was, but maybe it's not who it was. That's the reason.
So the town, for some reason, I don't know. This happens a lot. I don't know if this happens to other states, but here in Iowa, it seems like a lot of things are named after people or places that have no connection to the state whatsoever. I went to Cornell College just down the road, which is named after a different Cornell that founded Cornell University. There are towns in here in Iowa that have really weird names, and ours was named after Francis Marion, who served in the Revolutionary War. Why? Nobody knows. They just picked the name Marion and thought it was cool. He was known as the Swamp Fox. That was his nickname because he ran a lot of campaigns in the swamps. There's a Swamp Fox Festival, and we just felt that kind of fit. It's an honor to the city, and it's where it pulled its name from. So that's how we got the name.
It's cool, and I haven't told you this before, because the land that my family farm was on, it had a lot of swampland. We called them bottoms, and he tromped through there at one point. At least physically he did. So I just thought it was cool. It was a cool
what a neat connection
in a lot of ways, but that's a really cool one. And I also love the fox on your shirt, the fox in all your advertising. It must bring in people just having a fox.
It does. We now carry a lot of fun stuff that has foxes on it. This logo that's on my shirt, we belong to the Midwest Independent Booksellers Association, which is a regional association of independent bookstores, and they contract or work with an artist. His name is Kevin Cannon, and when you become a member of the association, he creates a custom logo for every bookstore. So this is the logo he created for us, so it always includes the store name and then some, whatever the building you're in or some reflection of the building you're in, and then if you have a mascot or whatever, he works that into the image as well. And then you own the image and can use it however you want. And so we've been putting it on t-shirts. We have stickers as well. So
exciting. So I know from knowing you that you have favorite genres, and so would you tell us that first? Like, what are your favorite kinds of books to read?
Yeah, some of my favorites, I love historical fiction, especially if it's set during World War II. That speaks to me a lot. It's probably because after 4 years of studying high school or literature in college, what got me reading again was Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. So which is kind of has a hint of World War II because she and Frank served during World War II. I also love historical fantasy, which I didn't realize until a few years ago is actually a genre. It just seemed a lot of the fantasy I was reading took place in sort of an alternate history, but it's historical fantasy when it's in the past and has magical elements to it. So I've been able to read a lot of that. And I'm a huge fan of YA fantasy. I don't necessarily read a lot of adult fantasy or epic fantasy where they're building whole worlds. I kind of like science fiction and fantasy that's rooted in our world in some way. So you might see it as somebody might call it near future science fiction or urban fantasy. You often hear that called as well. So those are the kind of the areas I enjoy reading the most.
So does that influence what you're looking for in a catalog? Do you get what you love? And I know you co-own it. So do you each have your genres that
we do? Yeah. The nice thing is sometimes it overlaps a little bit. Like Ursula and I are really big fans of World War II historical fiction. One book that all three of us, Amanda, Ursula, and I love is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. That's a beautiful book. Amanda really loves memoirs and biographies, especially if there's a little bit of humor in them. So we've got, a lot of our biographies and memoirs are some of the more funny or, have a hint of humor in them. A lot of the books that we carry are not necessarily what you would consider front list books either. We a lot of times are looking at the description of a book, what its comp titles are, which I'm sure the authors that follow you are familiar with comp titles, because those titles have sold well in our store. And sometimes we'll just take a chance on a book because, believe it or not, it has a pretty cover. So, and we talk a lot with our publisher reps, like we get to know them really well. And so they understand what we're looking for. And so we want to carry books that you're not necessarily going to see when you walk into Walmart or Target or Costco, or even on a table at Barnes & Noble. We want to find a unique title that you're not necessarily going to see somewhere else, but maybe is very similar to a best-selling book that you would find. Not to say we don't carry some of the bestsellers, that's just not than necessarily what all you're going to find in our 360 square feet. So
it's a small space, 360 square
it
feet.
is. It's a little bit like a TARDIS. It feels bigger on the inside.
Cozy too. It
Yes.
probably feels like you're in somebody's library in a way.
A little bit. And that's what we, people ask us, how do you pick the books? And a lot of times it's the stuff that we either have personally on our, in our bookshelves at home, or we would like to have on our bookshelf. So it does very much feel like you're walking into our living room when you walk into our shops.
I can see that, knowing you. I can see it, sort of the decorations being reflective of the owners, as I'm sure is the case with any small bookstore.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you have a favorite find or a favorite recommendation? And after that, we'll open for audience questions for a little bit.
So like I said, I'm a huge fan of World War II historical fiction, but what's been great, since there's been sort of a surge in World War II historical fiction in the last few years, now there's a lot of nonfiction coming out. So some of the real life or the events that are those historical fiction or books are based on now have a counterpart in the nonfiction. And a few years ago, there was a book that came out, and word had been getting out about Virginia Hall, who was a spy for the British and the Americans during World War II. And this week, a young adult version a version of her story came out, and it's called Codename Badass by Heather Demetrios. It's published by Simon & Schuster. And I absolutely love this book because it's a nonfiction book, but there's a lot of humor and tongue-in-cheek asides about Virginia's life and some of the struggles she went through. She spoke multiple languages. She had traveled the world. She went to Harvard, very non-traditional for that era. She didn't want to get married, that kind of thing. And she experienced tragedy in her life, in the fact that she accidentally shot her own foot during a hunting accident, and she lost part of her leg. And she still was the Nazis' most wanted spy during World War II. And she hiked over the Pyrenees in the dead of winter as an amputee and successfully made it across. So her story is very fascinating and a lot of fun. And this story had me laughing out loud and sending quotes to my sister via text, because it was just the author. Sometimes when you read a nonfiction book, like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. And every time I thought that, the author was writing something similar in the book about it. It was hilarious. It was awesome.
Well, she certainly was a badass.
Yes. And there are other women like her. There's a whole book that came out. See, now I'm just going to turn to the right and pull it out. That came out called The Girls Who Stepped Out of Line. So this is little stories about women like Virginia Hall. Virginia's in this too, that did amazing things during World War II. Everything from flying planes to spies, to working in hospitals and that type of thing. So this will give you a sneak peek, little essays about each one, and then you can kind of see where you want to go further. And hopefully there's a biography about that woman.
That's cool, because there's so many unsung stories about empowerment, of stories of empowerment during that time period. Part of it, I think, that they actually got the opportunity that they hadn't had to do what they were capable of, and the other part of it was that they were pushed a little bit. They probably got pushed out of their comfort zone.
And what's sad is that in some cases, especially with the women that were working with the Air Force as WASPs, transporting planes, doing training, they were not recognized. In many cases, the women were not recognized as veterans. So they did not get veterans benefits, nor get any recognition for the work that they were done. So it was all done almost in silence. And so now the stories are just coming out, and what they've had to do to fight for their rights and to be recognized for the work that they did. And in the case of the women pilots, they were test flying planes. They were transporting planes across the United States. They were fixing the planes and then having to test them. And many of them died in the line of duty, because the plane, something catastrophic happened on the plane, or it crashed. And in those cases, since they weren't considered members of the military, their families were responsible for having their bodies shipped back home. In many cases, the families couldn't afford to do that. So there's stories like that you're like, you think that, oh, they were in the military, so they must have vet status. In many cases, they didn't or don't.
Yeah, I believe it. Kaylee, do we have some questions or comments or hellos?
Yes, we do. Hello, everybody. We have a few questions today. Our first question is from Noelle Puglisi, and she's asking, in your opinion, what is the oddest or most unique book that you carry?
The oddest or most unique book that we carry.
Or maybe a few.
A few of them, yeah. And now this is the nice thing about being at the bookstore today. I can kind of scan the shelf. The one that we got in this week, I'm gonna reach it. I'm gonna just because it's right here. Choose Your Own Adventure was huge when I was a kid. This is actually a new Choose Your Own Adventure type book. So it's called Major Detours. We also have coloring books in stock, which the coloring books that we just got in stock are specifically for Halloween. So they're kind of creepy, crawly, kind of dark images, which is something you don't normally see in a coloring book, but those are some fun things that we've gotten in stock lately.
That is really fun. I love
that
color.
cover.
I love to color. So a Halloween themed, and Halloween is my favorite holiday. So
yeah, it's like I think it's like horror themed, so it's like got super creepy pictures and from like they're sort of on the horror movie vein.
Interesting. That's really fun. And then our second question right now is from Tatiana Ramsoff, and she's asking if you like to listen to books or read them.
I do both.
Them.
Yeah, I do both actually. So one of the perks of being a bookstore owner in the bookstore world is that I have the opportunity to get advanced reader copies and advanced listening copies. So there are books that come out ahead of the publication date, sometimes a year in advance or more. And so the downside is that I can get really excited about a book and then talk nonstop and nobody else can talk to me about it because nobody else has read it but me. So, but I usually read books. And then when I'm driving, I listen to books. That's the only time I can listen. Otherwise I space off and don't follow the story. So if I'm going a long road trip or just driving across town, I'm usually listening to a book. So.
How many books do you read do you read several books at a time, or do you have to finish one before you start another? And how many books a month would you say?
Typically, I probably have 2 going at a time. So I usually have a physical book going or an ebook. That's the other thing. We get a lot of advanced copies that are electronic copies because it's more cost effective to produce an electronic copy in some cases. So I usually have a physical type book going and then an audio book going at the same time. And sometimes I might have multiple books, going where it's an audiobook, and maybe nonfiction is a little bit more difficult for me to get through sometimes. So I might have a nonfiction book going and a fiction book going, but usually it's just 2. In an average month, I don't know how many books I read, but wow. I will say that in a normal year, I can get between 52 and 75 books read in a year. So
it's a lot. Kaylee,
I don't watch a lot of TV. That's my secret. I don't watch a lot of TV, and I take a book everywhere. So if I ever have downtime, then I have the opportunity to read.
Another question just came in, actually. It's from Noelle Puglisi. She said, do you have a favorite book? Mine is Cat in the Hat.
It's a great one. That's a good kids book. I love that one. My favorite book is probably, as I mentioned, Outlander by Diana Gabaldon.
Right.
I spent 4 years as a literature major in college, read a lot of what I like to say dead white guys. And I was pretty burned out on reading and even watching movies. So a lot of times I took a whole class where we read the book and then we watched a recent adaptation of it. So analyzing movies and analyzing books, trying to stop doing that after 4 years was a little difficult. And one of my best friends or one of my good friends said, you should try Outlander. And I was sucked in and it changed my life. I haven't really stopped reading since then. I was an avid reader as a kid, but you go and you start to do that, think about doing that as a job. Finding the joy in reading again can be tough.
What was your favorite kids book? Did you have one?
One of my favorites for picture book is The Monster at the End of the Book by John Stone. It's a Sesame Street book where Grover doesn't want you to turn the pages. That's one of our bestsellers for our children's books. We always have a huge stack because there are a lot of people that buy it for nostalgia reasons. And then when I was in junior high, and I'm so excited, my niece is finally reading it. it was The True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle by Avi. And that book is
Oh, I love that book.
one of the first books that I remember reading, where a woman was a girl was in a non-traditional role unexpectedly and does not follow the path that her parents want her to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And I reread it last year, and I was very concerned because my memory, I read it every few years, but your memory kind of fades a little bit. And I hadn't read it in several years. And I remembered suddenly there was, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, there's an incident with a Black man. And I thought, will this hold up? Because many times books just don't hold up, right? As times change, but it does. The way that storyline, that part of the story, which is a crucial part of the story, is handled so well, in my opinion, that I think the book still has some good lessons to be learned about the relationships between people, and trying to understand where we come from in life and how that influences what we do.
He's a brilliant author, and a forerunner, I believe, of the way books are written today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
really do, especially children's books.
Yes, definitely.
So we've got more readers than writers here today, but if I do want to ask a couple questions, because I'm sure people come in for the replay, and there may be some people watching that haven't asked yet. So I know when you order a book, you're looking in a catalog, and what brings your attention to a particular book? Is it the cover? Is it the tagline? Is it the description?
The way I typically view books is we see the cover. I see the cover first. And when we're working with a publisher rep, many times they've gone through, because they have their own internal meetings on what books, and they get their own advanced reader copies, their own galleys. So many times too, when we're looking, as we're, believe it or not, we're gearing up to buy books for next spring already. So 2022, we're already starting to get electronic catalogs from the publisher reps. So they'll make notations about what the plan, what they think about the book if they've read it, what are the publication or the promotion plans that are planned for it. Also, they'll provide us maybe with additional comp titles based on what they know about our store. There might be something that isn't traditionally comp with a new release that's coming out that they might think that we need to know about. So a lot of times we'll focus on that to begin with, but they always tell us, to filter by the publisher, or comments or rep comments. But I usually, even if a catalog is like an electronic catalog is 20 pages long, I'll still go through every single page, because I found some real gems in there that I, probably would have overlooked if I just looked at the publisher rep suggestions. So that's a lot of fun too, to find some of those that you're like, ooh, I think this is going to be a good one.
Well, thank you for your due diligence, because I heard you recommend some of those books, and as an author, I really appreciate it. Okay, so do you get indie author meaning a small publisher, or hybrid publisher, or self-published? Is that all on the board for you, or you?
It is all on the board for us. I actually just did a display today. We have several local authors that we know, and so we often will carry their books. And for us, because we are so small, we prefer to get the books from Ingram, because that allows us to. It's a lot easier for us to manage. And handle that. Consignment for our point of sale system is very difficult. So we just prefer, if the book is available on Ingram, then we can order from there, and we'll carry that in many cases. A lot of times we start out with having an event with an author before we decide to carry the book, to see what, if there is a reception for it, because obviously with our limited space, we can't carry everything. So and many times if we think maybe the book isn't a good fit, but we really know the author well, we'll invite them to do an event with us, and they can sell our books during that time to get that publicity, that coverage, and meet our customers. And hopefully in the future, maybe we can carry their book because we have people coming in because they know it's at our location, or they can get it from us.
That's wonderful. Thank you. So I think we're going to have enough time for me to ask you about your other hat that you wear. We talked just very briefly about what you do for authors and book coaches and editors and people like me.
Yes. So for the last year, I've been working one-on-one with authors and book coaches to help streamline the business aspect. I think that's the one thing that always, and Kathy, I'm sure you can agree with it, will agree with this. You sometimes don't think about the business aspect of being an author or being a editor, a book coach, but there's day-to-day things that you don't necessarily want to do or don't like to do or are very time consuming. And so I help streamline that process, help you develop processes that fit your own style of working so that it becomes a habit. So you're doing it at a specific time of the year or a specific, time of the day, week, whatever it might be. So you have more time and brain space for creative endeavors. So when you put a process behind something and make it the same steps every time, then you don't have to worry about, did I forget a step? Oh, do I need to do this time or not? You can look at a list or a flow chart, or it might be a checklist that you've written in a Google document. So you know what you need to do every time. So you don't have to worry whether you missed a step. It also helps on the business side too, is if somebody makes an unusual request, that's something that feels like it's outside the scope of what you're doing, you can look at your back of your process and go, is it too far out of scope and I need to say no, or can I make minor adjustments to my process to accommodate and work with this person? So it really helps with that as well.
So you bought this bookstore at a crucial time in history, and I've heard that the pandemic actually helped books. Did it help brick and mortar bookstores, in your opinion, nationally? And obviously you're doing quite well. And how do you balance? I know this is 3 questions. I'll ask them again if you need me to. How do you balance? You know how my brain works. How do you balance having your digital business, I'll call it a digital business, and your brick and mortar? I think that's a really interesting combination.
The nice thing is that I've got 2 fantastic partners in my business. And even in my work that you mentioned, my work with Veronica, like everybody understands that I have this life that I love, being able to work with helping an author or book coach develop their business and streamline it. And also I love the customer aspect of, this is the book on our shelves and getting it into your hands. I have kind of a unique position in the world where I understand it from the kernel of idea to that selling process and getting it into the hand of the reader. And so they're very understanding. There's certain days I work on certain things. And the nice thing about it is that some of the things I do for the bookstore are done not at the bookstore. I mean, that's the beauty of the internet, right? I can respond to emails and do social media from home most of the time. I don't necessarily need to be in the store. So I've got a pretty good balance from that, and very understanding people that I partner with. And so that's been awesome. Whether bookstores have been helped or hurt during the pandemic, this ABA actually had a stat last year that for every day of the pandemic, there was actually a bookstore that closed. So while there are many bookstores that opened, there are just as many bookstores that closed, if not more. And they still continue to struggle. Our biggest competitor is Amazon. And I invite people that want to learn more about how Amazon is not only affecting businesses like mine, but how they're affecting small business owners across the country, across the world, to pick up a book by Danny Kane. And now I'm blanking on the title. I should have written down How to Fight Amazon and Why, I believe the title is. He's the owner of Raven Bookstore in Lawrence, Kansas. And it started out, if you follow the Raven Bookstore on Twitter, or Instagram, do it. They've got a great feed in terms of talking about books and being advocates for small businesses and bookstores. It started out as a serious tweet. He actually wrote a letter to Jeff Bezos, like, want to sit down. I want to talk to you about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And it evolved into a collection of essays then that have now been published by a small press in Oregon. So,
well, I want to read that.
And the book is only 103 pages. It's a great little, And it talks about everything from how it's affecting the business practices that Amazon has that are affecting small businesses all over. And I think the amazing thing I learned is that one of the things that I always, because I see the Prime trucks all the time, is that even though it is it's being delivered by Amazon, that person isn't necessarily employed by Amazon. It's a third party organization or business that's running those trucks. And so if there's ever an accident or something that happens, Amazon isn't necessarily responsible for the accident. It's that third party business. So that was one thing I learned. And just, he also broke down, I think one of the most famous tweets they had, they broke down, like, if an independent bookstore offered books at the price that an Amazon or a larger retailer does, we'd be open like maybe a day if we're lucky. So there's some pretty interesting things about money in there.
So how does a regular reader help independent bookstores? That's a broad question.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question.
Bookshop.org is one way.
Yeah, bookshop.org is one. I think on an easy level is, I know that, because most independent bookstores can't sell their books at a discount, and everybody, as many people are on a budget, especially with the way things have been in the world in the last year. Even just following your independent bookstore online, supporting them by attending events, whether it's virtual events or in-person events. Some of them, we're trying to host a few small intimate events where we can still maintain social distancing.
Tough right now.
Doing a lot of, virtual events as well.
I miss them.
I know, I miss in-person events too. So it can be as simple as that, supporting them virtually by liking a page, liking their page, sharing or retweeting, reposting, whatever it might be on whatever platform you're on. Trying to make it a habit, if you do have one in your backyard, when you need a book, to contact them first to see if they can get it for you. And if they can't, check with the library. We partner with the libraries here all the time. Libraries are a great resource for books too. And then I think if you don't, Kathy, you and I were talking about this before we started, some people don't have an independent bookstore in their backyard. Right. And last year in January, bookshop.org was launched as an alternate to Amazon. And the amazing thing about that is that a portion of their profits go back to bookstores that are a part of when we can belong for free. We're members of the bookshop.org site. We get a portion of their profits every 6 months. So for some bookstores, that's meant the difference between open, keeping theirs open or closed, because maintaining shippings, if you have an online store, maintaining shipping and trying to keep up with online orders can be difficult. Whereas bookshop.org takes care of all the shipping and handling. We just, have a landing page, and people can buy whatever they want from that website, books and everything. So that's been the great thing about that. Audiobook listeners can cancel their Audible subscription and do Libro.fm instead. Once again, we receive a portion of every purchase or every membership through Libro.fm, and you can select any independent bookstore that belongs to the Libro.fm. Once again, that's free for us to belong to as an independent bookstore. And then we have ebooks, not that our ebooks don't sell very well, but there's a My Must Reads that some bookstores have the option to do ebooks as well. So most bookstores offer as the same reading formats, and try to help people as much as possible connect with books.
Thank you. That was such a great explanation, and I didn't even know some of it. Even though I knew as a writer, you really yearn for this sort of thing, and I'm so glad it's happening.
And the nice thing is too, like, people are like, well, I don't know if my independent bookstore does X, Y, or Z. Call them, send them a message, on an email, message via their website, and ask them. I mean, people will be like, I don't know, can you get this book for me? I'm like, yeah, we can get that book for you. It's still in print. Or some cases, no, sorry, they self-publish. It's only available via Amazon. But we're really helpful. And my favorite thing of my job is when people don't know what they want to read next, and they're like, Terri, what should I read? And so I've introduced a lot of books to a lot of people, and gotten people to expand beyond their normal genres because they're willing to kind of have a conversation. And that, I think, is the beauty of an independent bookstore, and even any small business, right? There's somebody in there whose heart and soul is in that business, and they will help you find the right gift, the right book for you or for your family member, your friend. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is like, they're looking for something very specific, and to find a book on the shelf or one of our gift items that might fit that is a lot of fun for me. I thrive on that.
I thrive on talking to bookshop owners. I used to go in my local bookshop when I was a kid and just like, I don't know why they let me do this, sit down on the floor, and my mother just could look. She could have probably gone shopping. She didn't, but I was just enraptured. And I remember one book, this Encyclopedia of Music, was something I went to first, and then I would go to the fiction. And it's the personal touch. And that's about life. I mean, we're missing it so desperately right now. And to have somebody who knows your tastes and thinks of you when a book comes over the counter is just a very special part.
And that's the fun thing about when we go through the catalogs, we'll make a lot of notes. I think this might be good for so-and-so, or we think so-and-so might like this book. And that's been a lot of fun too, to get to know customers. And that was the hardest thing about that. That's been the hardest thing, I think, for independent bookstores during COVID. We certainly pivoted as much as we could to hopefully having an online presence if we didn't have one. I'm trying to find alternate ways to sell books by doing Facebook Lives or, videos of the store, so people could, kind of shop by video, or QR codes in the windows with the display so you could scan it and buy it online. But there's still something about that personal touch, right? That we actually know what book you've read, what you've liked. It's not just some random algorithm generating if you read this, you might like this. Or we won't necessarily harass you either and ask you if you've actually read the book. Anybody gotten those emails? Hey, did you enjoy this book? I bought it 4 years ago. It's still on my e-reader. I don't know. No. Make me feel guilty.
It really is like that. And yet these are probably not even people that are making us feel guilty for not having read it.
It's an algorithm saying you bought this X number of times, months ago, we'll send you an email, or, so that's kind of fun too. And we do keep our system. The nice thing about our particular point of sale system is that if you give us your name and your first and last name at a minimum, we can keep track of what you buy from our store. And so if you're like in the middle of a series and you're like, oh, do I have this one yet? If you purchased the previous book at our store, we can look it up and tell you, yep, you have that one, or you don't have that one. And our point of sale system is even smart enough. It will tell us if you bought the book already. So we don't necessarily let you double buy unless you want to double buy it. Some people end up loving a book and coming back and buying a copy for a friend or a family member to give as a gift. So it's a lot of fun.
Wonderful. So is there anything that I haven't? Oh, that's what I want to ask. Do you think that bookstore owners, I always say, keep your day job to writers. Do bookstore owners now need to keep their day job? Or do you think
I think there's some I think there's some very successful, bookstore owners out there that don't necessarily have to have a day job, that this is their day job. And that's the dream, right? That's my ultimate goal, my ultimate dream. But at the same time, we have a really hard time letting go of the other work I'm doing. So I'm very happy that I've got very understanding group of partners, people that I partner with that understand my love for both, that my brain needs to work in both areas. And that's been a lot of fun. So, but yeah, there are some very successful bookstore owners out there, and I hope to be among them someday when I'm ready to give up one thing or the other. But right now I want to do it all, right?
Right. I totally understand that. And you are doing it all. So let's break for questions and comments if we have any more, Kaylee, and then we'll come back and say goodbye.
Sure. So we do have one last question from Tatiana Ramsoff, and you sort of covered this just a bit ago, but I'll ask it anyway if you have anything else to elaborate. She's asking, or she says, so before she asks, I wish we had a small bookstore where I live. Do you think this is a good time to start one to replace the big box stores that are closing?
The nice thing is the American Booksellers Association, so bookweb.org is their website address, provides a ton of great resources for individuals looking to start a bookstore. And there's even a course you can take, a set of courses you can sign up to take that will walk you through all the steps of setting up a bookstore. It is a lot of work. I will tell you that there's a lot of management that goes into it, and running any small business is this way, and so I think the resources that the ABA provides and the support that they provide to booksellers is so key to their success, and they've been so helpful to us through the whole process. They have been great advocates for us in terms of making sure that we in the days of COVID that we live in, qualifying for PPP loans and how to navigate the loan, grants that might be available for us, and advocating for us with Congress in terms of making sure that small business owners are recognized and that they understand the struggles that small business owners go through. And not every industry has that. So I'm very grateful for the work that American Booksellers Association does. So if you want to start a bookstore, I would say go to the ABA's website and start doing your research there. And if you do want to reach out to me and chat, I'd be happy. You're welcome to pick my brain. I don't know it all. I've only been doing this for just over a year as an owner, so I'll do my best.
I could see that. I could see Tatiana owning a bookstore.
The nice thing is there's so many different ways to run a bookstore. We've been talking about brick and mortar. There are people that have started with pop-up shops and bookmobile type, situations, and then have been able, because of the success of those, been able to get a brick and mortar, a permanent location. So there's so many different alternative or other ways to own a bookstore now. I think that's what's really cool about where the industry is going, is that you don't necessarily have to stick in one place, right?
It's really neat.
Well, thank you, Terri. I wish we'd had a few more questions from writers, but they may come later.
I actually thought of another way that people can support bookstores and booksellers and I can't believe I forgot this, because I've taken advantage of it as well myself. So there's a foundation called BINC. It's the Book Industry Charitable Foundation, and they provide support, financial support and other support for booksellers in need. And because of what's happened in the pandemic and natural disasters around the country, booksellers can apply to them to get funds, financial assistance, to pay the bills, to get out of a horrible situation, whether it's a personal situation or that kind of thing. So if it's in your budget and you want a foundation that supports booksellers, definitely check out BINC. I've received assistance from them twice, and it really helped make ends meet when things were tough. So if you didn't know there was an association, or you're wondering, well, how could I give to something like that, BINC is there. So definitely check that out.
I'm thinking about those two bookstores that closed the past 6 months, I think, maybe a little bit further back. Maybe they didn't even know about that. So thank you for sharing. And thank you for sharing all about books. Is there something we haven't touched on today that you'd like to add?
No, I think I just want to reiterate the first step, supporting an independent bookstore is looking in your own backyard. You can go to indiebound.org to do a search if you're unsure if there's any independent booksellers in your area. And then if you can't find one, you can use that site to find one. I know, people have gone back to one in their hometown where they grew up, or their college town if they don't have one. So lots of different ways to connect with them, and encourage everybody to do that and keep reading.
Yeah, keep reading. Please keep reading. But I don't think we have to worry about that with
No, somebody asked me earlier today if I thought print was dying, and I said, nope, it's not. And I actually pulled a book off our shelf that I had read a couple of years ago that said, I think it was as of like 2011, hardback covers were once again overselling ebooks. So print is not dead.
There's something, and I've had this conversation with you because my husband doesn't want the floor to fall in. And you can tell that I support the book industry. Some of these are old books behind me that I just love, but I've got some new ones back there too. And there's something about the weight of the book in your hands and the smell of the pages.
I will lose track of time in here some days. After we close at 2:00 in the afternoons most days, and a couple hours will go by and I'll like, oh my gosh, it's 5:00, because it's so quiet and peaceful, and the smell is just so comforting to me.
I totally hear you. So with that said, I always share tea bag wisdom, and I thought it's just always so perfect. It couldn't be any more perfect. In the beginning is you, in the middle is you, and in the end is you. It's all about books. Oh yeah.
Oh, nice. Wonderful.
So thank you for coming and talking all about books. Tell us where we can find you.
Sure. So our website is swampfoxbookstore.com, and then we have links to all of the different partners that I mentioned: bookshop.org, Libro FM, and My Must Reads. And if you want to use that as your leaping off point, you can, because you can, search for other bookstores on each one of those sites to support if you have a specific bookstore in mind. If authors or book coaches, editors and such want to reach out to me about my other hat, my digital business, you can go to terrimleblanc.com and reach out to me there.
So I'll share both of the main ones in the comment section after we leave. It'd probably be an hour or two later, anybody that's listening right now. But if you want to come in and share the other ones, please feel free and interact if anybody has questions that's watching the replay. Thank you. It's just been so fun.
Yes, it has been.
And I hope everybody continues to join us here, me and Kaylee, live every second Thursday on my Facebook page. I interview a range of entrepreneurs, coaches, authors, so a few mystics. And you can find all my interviews archived on my Facebook pages. And I also have them on my YouTube channel. And my last name is spelled with a P. There's no B in it, in case I've had a few people say, I can't find your YouTube channel. So maybe I'll put that under there too, the link to the YouTube. And I will post Terri's links. You can find out more about me at shoresofourSouls.com and at ground1coaching.com. And I look forward to seeing you again soon here. Next week on Story Hour, we'll be interviewing one of my favorite books of the past 2 years. It's called Freedom Lessons. It's by Eileen Sanchez, and I'll be interviewing her over at the same time on my author page. So until then, looking forward to seeing you all again. Feel free to post away, and I bid you all a great weekend with a great book to read. Keep reading, like Terri said. Thanks, Terri. Bye-bye.